Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are into fishing, I did upload a couple short videos from another keeper that I caught, but I'll save the fish stories for last. I know a lot of people aren't into fishing, so we'll save that for the end of the show for those of you that are interested in why I fish and the amazing year so far with the striped bass. Let's go ahead and get into some of these headlines. Now, it's been a while, hasn't it? Weirdly, there hasn't been a lot going on. I think probably the mainstream media wants everybody focused on what's going on in Europe, don't they? And so, therefore, they don't want too many distractions on other things. They did the same thing with Vidco, didn't they? They had us all focused on Vidco. All the news was about Vidco. Now that that's over, now they want all the news to be focused on what's going on in Europe. And so, and when they do that, they don't want too many distractions. Now, of course, the Johnny Depp trial is happening as well. And some people ask me my personal feelings on that. And to be honest with you, to me, it's another distraction. Now, why do they do this? Well, they want to keep people in the right-left paradigm. But they also want you distracted and inside other people's drama. And I saw bits and pieces and clips from the trial, and to me it just looks like a bunch of actors. I'm sorry, but that just looks like what's going on. And people get all into this, and then they drag some of this drama into their own personal relationships, don't they? And then they go, oh look, now men are finally starting to be heard. Well, I wouldn't be so quick to jump on that bandwagon, okay? Because there's always a 1-2 punch, isn't there? They draw us in and go, oh, maybe now it's time for men to be heard. There is such a thing as narcissist women. And look, he's proving it. But again, wait for the 1-2 punch. This will all circle back around. And of course, the one person that they choose to publicly show their trial about how they were narcissistically abused by a woman, that one person just so happens to have a drug and alcohol problem. What about all the regular men out there that don't have vices and quote unquote triggers so that narcissists can have their way in their life? Well, there's millions and millions of men out there that are also dealing with that situation. So maybe that's the psyop, I don't know, but we're going to see what happens. There could be a doozy at the end of the trial which proves that, Depp was a really bad guy or something. They'll come out with some evidence and then dismiss the whole thing. So those are my thoughts on the trial. I mean, if you like soap operas and entertainment, it's probably really good material for that. But for me, I just don't want to waste my time. I've got people, some of my friends, watching this stuff 8 hours a day. This is like the new OJ trial, basically. And it's crazy. So, let's get into some of these headlines here. Now, Obama has decided he wants to take the lead on disinfo on the internet. Now, I think we can all guess why he probably wants to do that, right? All the stuff out there about Michelle Obama, and a lot of you guys have exposed. And, it's crazy, right? So this is probably why he's the one who's going to go, enact revenge on these people spreading misinformation about his family or information about his family, right? But let's read this and see what he has to say. Now, this is kind of weird. An ex-president wanting to be in charge of disinformation? He says, our prejudices aren't challenged. They're reinforced. Well, what do you think the mainstream media does? They reinforce prejudices every single day. It's called mind control, programming. This is exactly what the media does. And they have a much wider and intense voice than anybody who is not in the mainstream media. So what are they talking about? They should be, Obama should be focusing on the mainstream media in terms of their, part in all of this. They're the ones with the most reach. So let's read what he has to say. Our former president, Bo Mama, took the stage at Stanford University on Thursday to deliver a keynote addressing disinfo and the dangers it poses to democracy. It's always danger against democracy, isn't it? Because that's the one thing that they can always fall back on. to use as a fear tool. They simply say our way of life is threatened if we don't get a handle on X, Y, and Z. And unfortunately, we fall for it. You guys, I know other countries aren't perfect, but take the time today after the show's over and subscribe to at least 3 channels from a foreign country. Maybe you can subscribe to a channel in South America. Maybe you can subscribe to a channel in Russia, which I am subscribed to, a channel named Dan, I think Seekos or something. And he has a little family there. Or any country for that matter. And you'll see that it isn't so much different than our own country. And in fact, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of things I like what I see when it comes to some countries. Like, they seem to be more family orientated. They seem to greet each other on the street and love one another and kind and polite. There isn't this air of ego and dismissibility and fear in people's eyes. People actually love one another. They're actually outside doing things instead of on their phones. So, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to live there, but there's a lot of things that, they fear us into believing that, if we don't do this and we don't do that, our way of life is threatened. Now, of course, not all of America is like that. There are places in the South you can go to where you still find loving people, God-fearing people. Everyone says, God bless you. They don't care what background they're from. They want to bless you with blessings. So they'll say it. And that's the way it's supposed to be, isn't it? At least for those of us who are believers. But then there are other parts of the country where that's not even close to being the case. People frown upon you, or they get offended if you say God bless you. So things are always not what they seem. Understand that you're seeing everything through the lens of mainstream media and programming. And that's why many of us have these certain, viewpoints about the world. It's because of programming. But once you get out of this place and you can explore or even go online and see how other people live, it begins to break down some of these barriers. And then you realize that these people aren't much different than we are. So let's keep reading here. Bo Mama, whose campaign successfully used social media to raise awareness of his agenda, touched on everything from social networks and their algorithms to the First Amendment and the war in the new Ukraine. Now, it's interesting because here they are now. They're finally starting to talk about these algorithms, aren't they? And we've been talking about this, and many other YouTube channels have been talking about this for years. The oppressive algorithms. The algorithms that reward mainstream content that is quote-unquote certified, pushing all of that to the forefront of the searches, and then they punish or criminalize anything that's not mainstream. So that all gets pushed to the bottom. Unless it's material or, what's the word I'm looking for? Unless it's something that, people doesn't really matter, like balloons and kittens and makeup, that kind of stuff. They want you distracted with that. So the algorithms will push that to the top. So basically what it creates is the mainstream echo chamber where only certified content is allowed to be at the top, filled in with fluff content, kittens, you guys, even certain things like fishing are now being punished by the algorithms. They don't want people fishing. They don't want viral fishing videos because that's self-sustainability, isn't it? Well, it's really not anymore, but we'll get to that at the end of the show for those of you that are interested in what's happened to wild and organic hunting in America. Let's keep reading this. Not all problems we see we are seeing now are an inevitable byproduct of this new technology. They're also the result of very specific choices made by the companies that have come to dominate the internet. Generally, in social media platforms in particular, decisions that intentionally or not have made democracies more vulnerable. Now, if you haven't heard by now, Google has sent out a letter to everyone, including myself, saying that they are going to unmonetize any content that says anything against the new Ukraine. Anything. Now, this isn't just YouTube, you guys. This is all websites. Apparently, Google controls 80% of all website revenue. I didn't know that, but they pretty much run the show. So, we're talking every single website that uses advertising dollars to try to stay afloat and keep their website going are now going to be unmonetized if they disagree with the agenda. That's pretty much what they said. So now, who really has the echo chamber? Who really has control of all the information? They do, and they know it. But now they're in cleanup mode. They have to tie up all the loose ends and make sure that they finally hammer this out. Now, there will come a day where this channel will not be on the internet anymore. I already know it. It's probably going to be in the next, at the least, it'll be the next year. And at the most, I give it 5 years tops. I mean, because you can only go so deep in the way that we code our language, right? Because it gets to the point where the language is so heavily coded that no one will know what we're talking about, right? Except for you guys. So, I'm sure you get complaints already. Yeah, I go to that channel. I don't really understand what he's talking about. That's because they haven't been on the journey. They haven't seen this from start to finish. And they haven't seen how we've had to adapt and adjust to continue to get the word out. So now you're starting to understand the problem. That all of this is, they're trying to bring this to an end so they have total and complete media domination. And they do it through algorithms. They do it through search results and so on and so forth. So let's keep reading this. Still, Bo Mama pointed out the society's divisions from sexism and racism to ethno-nationalism didn't form on social networks like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. They simply amplified there thanks to the millions of users. Well, that's a little bit of a, I don't know if I quite believe that. Okay. So he's trying to give up ground a little bit, but then tell a lie by giving up ground. You guys, nobody is on these platforms, getting popular by being a racist, for instance. You know what I mean? Well, according to their definition of racism, maybe. But according to the truth, some people believe that is the case just because someone's maybe racially insensitive, for instance. That doesn't make you a racist because you're racially insensitive. That doesn't mean you want to take over the world with white people just because you maybe were raised a different way and you don't know how to be sensitive to people's race. Or sexism, right? So some people have conservative values maybe. And women in those groups have conservative values too. So maybe they have a different idea of what it's like to be a wife, for instance. Well, they'll call that sexism. But really, a lot of it's biblically sound. I'm not saying all these people should get a free pass. What I'm saying is the left's definition of some of this stuff is far different than the right's definition of it. So now the left gets to decide what is what. They get to define some of these terms. And now you see the problem. Because Google, of course, is left-leaning. And they're taking the world down an agenda, a path to the way they want the world to look. And that includes norms. That includes your children and what they're going to grow up in and what they think is normal. All of that is being controlled by that. So now you see the problem. This is an all-out assault on moral values and God. When you boil it all down. So, now look at the gall of this. So, he says that they need to challenge basically the way people think and not reinforce it. So basically he's admitting that they want to control people's minds. Now they call them prejudices, but like I just told you, what's a prejudice to one person is not a prejudice to another person. When I went to Arkansas, people used the term colored around me. Did that offend me? No, because that's how they grew up learning. These were people that loved me and told me God bless you and bought me donuts and cookies and muffins. So there's a disconnect there. Now, if they were using the word colored and ignoring me and stealing my stuff and doing stuff, then you could say that might be racism. But it's just racial insensitivity, okay? And a lot of people get triggered by that. I remember I was, telling my mother a little bit about the time I spent in Arkansas. She's like, and this is literally how people think now that are from the generation of the 60s and the 50s. They literally think that those people are being nice to you so they can hurt you. They literally think that someone could put poison inside your cupcake. They literally think that it's all a setup and that people aren't genuine. They don't understand how to make the difference between racial insensitivity and real, true racism, which I believe is very, very rare these days. How can it not be rare? People have been shamed out of belief in their racial, values and things. They've been shamed out of it. They wouldn't dare say some of this stuff publicly in fear of losing their job. And that's probably a good thing. But at the end of the day, why is this still being hammered home that this is happening? When the second something like that happens, it goes on YouTube and goes viral, and the cop gets fired and all this stuff happens. Now, I know that cops don't get fired every time, but think of that person. They would, in order for them to think to actually act like a racist and think of the consequences of that in today's society, very few people cross that line. They've been feared out of it. Okay. So is there a widespread problem like there used to be? I do not think there is. Are there pockets of people? Yes, but there's pockets of people that do all kinds of weird things. There's pockets of people who steal. There's pockets of people who do theft, who hurt people. And those are the people that are in prison, right? So they want to make this sound like there's a racist around every corner. That's what they want to make this sound like, so they can continue to divide the races. And like I said, if there was ever a place where I could go where I was literally 35 miles from the headquarters of the K to the K to the K, and people were still telling me God bless you and giving me free coffee and free pastries, then if that doesn't tell you guys what's really going on, I don't know what does. There was even a black sheriff that was obviously appointed there. So these problems aren't as widespread as you think. A lot of this is in our heads. Like I said, my mother was like, don't eat the donuts. Don't do this. I'm like, Mom, come on. Really? You really think that someone would poison my coffee and then get caught doing it and then be in prison for murder just because of my color? Really? No, Mom. But this is the way some people think. So I love my mother. I'm not saying this to criticize her. I'm just saying that people have different, values and belief systems. It's much more believable that your own government would poison you. That is more believable to me than a person that has everything to lose, their livelihood and everything else, if they got caught doing something like that. Now, let's keep going here. I think we spent enough time on Bo Mama. Oh, well, I guess this is important, so I want to keep reading this. What does he say here? Instead, he says, let's make this a little bit smaller. It's too big. Bo Mama, however, didn't lay the blame for the spread of disinformation. Okay, so we already read that part. As for solutions, he called on platform owners to be more transparent about how their algorithms function. Yeah, I would like to see some transparency about their algorithms. That way you know how to get the word out about what you're trying to talk about without worrying about what you say is going to cause you to be pushed to the bottom and no one see your video, right? So let's keep going here. What's more, he pushed back against calls to further regulate speech on social platforms. Hey, I like that. That's a good thing. Saying freedom of speech is at the heart of every democratic society. Well, it sounds to me like he's going to do some kind of give and take, some kind of negotiation. Democrats in Congress have repeatedly admonished platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, for allowing the spread of disinfo and called on them to improve content moderation practices. However, platforms receive broad immunity for user-generated content thanks to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Many Republicans, meanwhile, have railed against social media sites for removing content that violates their terms of service, claiming it impedes users' free speech rights. Again, however, platforms are protected because content moderation is a form of free speech. So, I guess we're going to see how all this shakes out, right? Now, this keeps going on and on. We're not going to read any more of that. Let me make sure you guys are with me, and we'll keep going with these headlines. Now, all this stuff is very important because we got to keep tabs on what is going on in the mainstream news to see how they're steering and directing our society down a set path and a set agenda. Now, this one is weird. Let me see if I can fix this here. Is that an... Oh, let's see here. That's an ad. Let's see if we can fix this up here. Now, Rudy Giuliani in what is this? A Jack-in-the-Box, pops up out of a Jack-in-the-Box on this show called The Masked Singer. Now, I don't watch any of these shows, really. Just not into anything that comes out in terms of the daily shows, that they used to do over the years. When I was younger and there was only 5 channels on TV, then I was more apt to sit and watch TV, but I'm just not really into this stuff. But some of you might be. The Masked Singer. Now, I think what they do with this is someone is singing in the background and you can't see who they are, and you have to literally guess. Look at this creep. Let's back this up a little bit. You literally have to guess who it is. And this is probably the scariest thing I think I've ever seen in my life. The clown show continues. Rudy Giuliani popping up out of a Jack-in-the-Box. Unbelievable. Let's see if we can put the sound on here for you guys so you guys can hear what's going on. What is going on here?
Before I met you, I broke 1,000 hearts. Before I met you, and I'm done. Break 1,000 more.
Are you kidding me? Look at this. It's even got the question mark on there like the Joker. What? He looks like a feathered serpent. Unbelievable. So these people know what's going on. We all know what the question mark is. That's the spiral. It's basically the Joker. He would always put a question mark. And it's basically stands for the devil. The devil is the Joker. Okay?
Baby,
unbelievable.
Ken Jeong walks off set after Rudy Giuliani is revealed as one of the disguised contestants.
Now, Rudy Giuliani likes to dress up, doesn't he? He likes to dress up in all kinds of things, including women's clothes, and get kissed by Thump. Remember that video? Many people have not seen that. And once again, because the internet is controlled. So things like that should be seen by everybody never get seen. So they can whitewash what's going on. The cross-dressing Giuliani.
Masked Singer.
I can neither confirm nor deny that, but yes.
So that's the show. I'm not going to torture you guys anymore with that. But that is what's going on with Rudy Giuliani. Just more and more occult disclosure. Now, people always tell conservatives to respect their rights, don't they? They'd say, hey, you have to respect our rights, our orientations, and our beliefs. But for some reason, when it comes to the respecting of rights and beliefs of conservative people, they seem to forget how to do that, don't they? Forcing their beliefs on our children, which should be off limits. And so this debate keeps coming up, doesn't it? And you have to ask yourself why. So apparently they just passed this law in Florida protecting children's ears from adult subjects in school. And this is something that everybody should agree on, but for some reason, this keeps getting debated. Now, Bo Jivin, of course, came out and was criticizing DeSantis for doing this. Basically, DeSantis set up this law to where you can't talk about these adult themes and sexual themes in school. That should be a slam dunk, you guys. I don't care what your belief system is. That should be a slam dunk. Let's read this. At a Democratic fundraiser in Seattle on Thursday, Bo Jivin weighed in on the fallout over the bill signed by DeSantis last month, banning teachers from holding classroom instruction about orientation or gender identity. And it says, this is not your father's Republican Party, Bo Jivin said at the fundraiser. Now, how can he say this with a straight face? Of course, you shouldn't be talking about these things with children. They're too young. They're not even mature yet. This is something, I mean, if you were to make the argument should be when they're at least through puberty. But apparently, we live in the Twilight Zone, where the younger the better with these people. So that's what's going on. And I applaud DeSantis for passing this. I know a lot of people are waiting for the other shoe to drop with this guy. And I'm not saying it never will. But at least the things he's doing now are protecting our children. for now. We'll see how this shakes out as time goes on. Now, people are starting to lose their steam when it comes to getting jabbed and poked. This is the consensus. The mainstream media is finally admitting it. Took them 3 years to admit that this was never going to last. And because the whole time they were trying to say, oh, there's lines going around the stadium. People want to get poked. We're running out. We don't have enough. Well, apparently that was not the case. Drive to smack the nation against Vidco is losing steam. See what's going on here. In the middle of last year, the W to the H to the O began promoting an ambitious goal, one it said was essential for ending the spam-demic. Fully smack the nation of 70% of the population in every country. Now, as many of you know, I'm re-uploading the Utopia decode that we did from last year. It's going to be screened on Saturday. Hopefully you guys can make it, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that was probably one of the best decodes we did, because now we can look in hindsight and see that, yes, in fact, it was all about Smack Scene Day. And Kovacs, which is actually the real name of the smack scene that they've launched around the world, in Africa and in Eastern European countries. That is the smack scene of choice. It's actually called Kovacs, and that's named in this 2013 Utopia series. So I hope you guys can watch that with me on Saturday, because it spells it all out. Now, I had originally taken that video down. I uploaded it. It went through the algos. I think it's going to be okay, and we'll see what happens. But it's very important that we look back and see how some of these decodes have aged, because they were right on the money. Let's keep reading here. It says, now it is clear that the world will fall far short of the target by the deadline. And there's a growing sense of resignation about public health experts. Among public health experts, that Vidco smack the nation coverage may never be achieved in most lower income countries. Now, what they're not telling you here is that a lot of these countries in Africa simply didn't want the free smack scenes. But yet, they had some of the lowest rates of infection in the entire world. So, weird, right? Very, very weird. And they keep leading with the countries that did accept it, and they show you all the data for that, but they want to strangely avoid the data on the countries that have very low smack the nation rates and how they're doing, because they don't want you to see that things were not as bad as they thought they were going to be. Now, this story is crazy, and I've got basically the news pulled up here for this story about this particular sarcophagus. This 1,000-year-old sarcophagus. It had a perfectly preserved body inside. The strange thing about this casket was that it was lead, solid lead. Now they're getting close to opening this casket. They've already gone in with the camera. That's how they saw that it was perfectly preserved body in there. With a little scope, they drilled a little hole. But now they're going to open this thing for the first time in like 1,000 years. Now, where is this sarcophagus? Well, it was under the burnt ruins of the Notre Dame floor. Remember, the Notre Dame fell? The spire fell over, just like an iPad Go 2, and burned. And so they've been renovating it for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's supposed to be opening very soon. But in the renovation, they pulled up the floor and they found this, what appears to me, we speculated that this might be a vampire, a real-life vampire, buried in a lead casket. Now, why could we speculate that this might be the case? Well, we read ancient stories, didn't we, of the Bride of Dracula being buried in a lead casket to trap her spirit and her soul. We also discovered that almost all the royal family members, when they die, are buried in lead caskets. Now, why would they do that? Lead is like a super cheap material. It's super heavy. There's no physical reason why they would do that, other than this ancient practice of burying demonically possessed vampires in these lead-lined caskets. It basically keeps them in there so they can't get out. Weird, right? So as soon as these pictures come out of whatever's in this thing, whatever ghoul could be hiding out in this thing, we'll be reporting on it, and I'll show you guys. We'll do a headline show and include this in the future show. Now, North Korea. Look at this. I should have probably included this story when we were talking about smack scenes, but we'll cover it now. North Korea has 0% smack scene rate. 0%. Now, why are we just hearing about this now? Why wasn't this like headline news? Why weren't people like trying to follow what was happening there? Because they can't control the narrative with this country. Very hard to get information in or out. Basically what you have here is a control group, don't you? You have a group of people, an entire nation that has 0 smack scenes, and had positive information gotten out about how they weathered the spam-demic. That would have been very damaging to the narrative, wouldn't it? And this is probably, in my estimation, why you haven't heard anything about this. North Korea and Eritrea are the only 2 nations that have 0 smack scenes. Now, many of the African nations allowed a few shipments to come in. Most of the African nations are sitting at 2% smack the nation rate, maybe 5%, but none of them anything close to the 30, 40, 50, 60% that many of the other countries of the world achieved. But look at this. How did these people survive a spam-demic? Now you can say, oh, because people can't get in and out of that country. Well, we were told this thing was so contagious that all it takes is one person to come in on a flight or visit their grandma, and that's the end. It's so contagious. Remember this? Never forget, you guys. Never forget. So here we have an entire country without the miracle that saved the world, the smack scenes. We were told the world was going to end if we didn't all get smacked in the nation. Now, here's the crazy thing. They don't even give us statistics on North Korea. Look at this. It's grayed out here. You don't get to find out what they're doing. Now, they could easily, do some kind of guesswork. But they're not even trying to guess, because I think they know. I think they know that things aren't even close to it. Because guess what? If things were that bad, wouldn't we be flying satellites over them and saying, look at all the mass graves from all the Vidco deaths? If things were bad, wouldn't that be what our government would do? Absolutely, they would do that. You think we're not surveilling that entire country? You think we're not looking for an excuse to expose them and shame them for not getting the smack scene? And what I'm trying to say here is, if there was evidence that there were millions of people dying in North Korea, we would know about it, wouldn't we? Through a satellite, we would see white trucks, we would see quarantine facilities, we would see the whole 9 yards. It would be paraded all over. I mean, what better tool could that be to drive people in to get smack scenes than to show a country who refused them and they're dying by the millions and tens of millions, right? That would be the best friggin' advertisement for the New World Order that I can even think of. But apparently it's not happening because we're not hearing a word about it. And they're not even reporting any numbers. So, I'm sure the excuse that they're giving as to why there's no information coming out from North Korea is because of their oppressive government. But I argue that if people were dropping like flies, we would be hearing about it. They would have surveillance footage of it from satellites. They can see a postage stamp on the back of a donkey. Now, here's what we do know. The scientists in this article are going to blame North Korea for any new variants that emerge. Oh, go figure. Wait a minute. I thought there was no free travel going in and out of this country. Well, how is a variant going to get out? This just makes no sense. When you start thinking, using your own critical thinking, you can see how these people just say whatever they want. Look at this. With no vaccine, look at the fear. North Korea risks becoming the epicenter of new variants as a result of the population's low immunity to the virus, the panel found. So how are these new variants going to escape? On a bat? Or a flying serpent? Or, I mean, how is it going to get out? Or a fish? Or, I mean, really? Wow. Okay. So they have no data, do they, to make these kinds of sweeping statements that new variants could emerge from North Korea because they refuse the vaccine. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, you guys. Welcome to the Twilight Zone. Here's another miracle victory. French President Emmanuel. God is not with us. Macron, who won re-election despite the fact that nobody likes him. Now, I'm not even going to read this article because it's probably all lies. Bo Jiven now blames inflation on the worker shortage that he and Thump caused as they try to justify all the money that they spent during the spamdemic. Oh, let's shut down all the businesses and then blame the workers for not coming back to work. So now it's our fault. Wow. Forget about that we pay people to stay home and we shuttered all the small businesses in America for almost a year. Forget about all that. Now it's your fault because you're not coming back to work. Rapid inflation, lower unemployment. How the U.S. spamdemic response measures up. The United States spent more aggressively to protect its economy. That's like saying jumbo shrimp. Spent more aggressively to protect its economy from the spamdemic than many global peers. A strategy that has helped to foment more rapid inflation. Wait a minute. Weren't they the fact checkers saying the inflation was not caused by the spending? These people are so confused. America is grappling with what many economists see as an unsustainable worker shortage that threatens to keep inflation high and may necessitate a firm response by the Federal Reserve. So now they're going to spank us with the Federal Reserve paddle. Yet U.S. unemployment has not recovered as fully as in Europe, some other advanced economies. That reality is prompting some economists to ask, was America's spending spree worth it? Well, I already told you the first stimulus check this was not going to be worth it. Now, here's what I think is going to happen. I think as some of these vaccine mandates fall away for the private sector, people will start to go back to work. Okay? Because that was holding a lot of people back. Nobody wants to get a vaccine and have to wear a mask all day at work. So that's probably 5 to 10% of the people who are unemployed right now. They'll go back. They'll be like, okay, we can go back now. A lot of people aren't going back because they're still getting unemployment, though. And so all of this will end up fixing itself eventually. But don't blame us. We're not the ones who caused this inflation. They should have let the economy stay open. Fully open. Be leaders, which is what we keep claiming we are in the world. Be leaders. Protect the people that are most vulnerable. Give them guidelines and ways to live their life so they can protect themselves and let everybody else keep going. That's what should have happened. So Thump gets a D- on how he handled things. He pretended to do a few things, but he really didn't do what he should have did. Okay. He caved in to the pressure, thinking he was going to get reelected. And to this day, I hear people saying he had to do that to get reelected. I go, well, how'd that work out for him? Didn't work out very well, did it? Now, I got this last thing I want to share with you guys, and one of you guys sent this to me, and I want to show this to you because this is spooky. This study here talks about rabies, but it doesn't just talk about rabies. What I'm going to show you next is going to blow your mind, because it also talks about Artemis, the twin sister of Apollo. I'm just going to read this to you as we start to wind down the show here. Let me make sure I'm with you guys. And we're going to read this abstract. And this is shocking. Shocking. Again, one of you sent this to me. A historical review of the treatment of human rabies from ancient times up to the present is undertaken. An attempt is made to trace parallel between the concept of the main cause of rabies in a certain period and the kind of treatment utilized. The ancient Greek goddess Artemis was considered to be a healer of rabies. Let me pause there. This confirms pretty much the path that we've been on, doesn't it? When I first started talking about Artemis, people were like, dude, here you go again, another rabbit hole. I had no idea that Artemis was the healer of rabies, but here we are. It all fits together, you guys. Let's keep reading here. They already identified wound cauterization. People of the 1st century AD knew of the infection deriving from the saliva of a rabid dog and called it virus in Latin. Whoa, so the actual word virus comes from rabies. What? During medieval times, when a magical and religious concept regarding health was prevalent, principal protector was called Saint Humbert. During the Renaissance, many experiments were carried out and new information on the disease was obtained. Both were basic in opening the way for new findings in the future. At that time, the miasmatic and contagious theories were predominant. Pasteur strongly objected to the idea of spontaneity of rabies. At the end of the 10th, what is that? That's 19, isn't it? That is 19. The end of the 19th century, based on microbial discoveries, Pasteur brought about a great scientific revolution as regards to the possibility of treating rabies by using a smack-scene. At the present time, smack-scenes are the nervous type or not, and the recommended dose varies. A large number of studies on smack-the-nation have been undertaken. So, I'm going to pin this comment with all these links, and you guys can see for yourself that the original name they used for rabies was the word virus. It says it right there. Now, let me go back into the chat and we'll finish up the show with fish stories, because it's very important that we understand what this is all about. Now, Jesus was the fisher of men, wasn't he? And there's a reason for that. Because Jesus was a fisherman. Jesus ate lots of fish, didn't he? He had the disciples catch thousands of fish in a net. The net was so full they couldn't even bring it up. He also fed entire crowds of people with 2 fish. In fact, Jesus was born in the age of Pisces, which is the 2 fish. And so, it always shocks me. We are a Christian channel. And 99% of the people that come here have Christian beliefs. But every so often, I'll get 5% of the people offended when I catch a fish. Or offended when they think a fish is suffering. You guys, these are not biblically based feelings. I don't want to tell you how to feel. But imagine, basically, when you're saying that, you're saying, then you're mad at Jesus. Are you mad at Jesus because they pulled all these fish out of a net? Do you think they went and bonked all these fish on the head? Thousands of fish? No, they pulled them out of the net. They probably sat in the sun and they perished. So, think before you leave comments like that. Because what you're really saying is you're putting God and Jesus on judgment. You're putting God on judgment because he also dispatched animals, or had people dispatch animals based on their sins in the Old Testament. Heck, the first gift that God got was a lamb from Abel. So, think before you say stuff, you guys. I always lose probably 1% of my subscribers every time I put up a fish video. Well, and I postulate that, you know what? Maybe those people need some more learning to do before they come back to this channel. Now, where is this coming from? Where is this sentiment coming from where people are shocked and alarmed when they see an animal that's about to be eaten? Where is this sentiment coming from? Well, it's a satanically based sentiment. It's the devil at its core, and it's through the programming that comes through our televisions that tells people that, oh, look at the poor animal. That's because God made us do that, and that's sin. So, God is so lame that he wants something to die when we sin. Like, this is what the devil's saying, you guys. And unfortunately, this sentiment is widespread. It's taking hold. Our children are afraid to eat meat now. They won't eat meat because they feel as if something is being killed. And I postulate, and I argue that, do you think a tomato has any less feelings than a bug? Do you know what happens when, for instance, a plant gets hit with frost overnight? They lose their leaves. They shed their leaves. Plants have as much life force as living creatures. Think of a sequoia tree, for instance. These things almost like have a brain. So what's the difference of pulling fruit off of a tree or harvesting a fish? I don't know. But understand that this is the very sentiment that they will use to bring us to a meatless society. And it probably will come. It will come. And this is why the Bible had to address this. The Bible calls it a doctrine of demons. In 1 Timothy, you can read it yourself. The abstaining from meat, doctrine of demons. I didn't write that in the Bible. You can look at all the different versions, and that's what it says. Now, if you want to not eat meat, that's your choice. But don't go judging and criticizing people that do. Now, let me tell you what happened this morning, because you guys know me. So, one wasn't enough. Well, and let me tell you why. Okay? If you want to average back in history, all the years I bought fishing licenses, all the fuel that I put in my car to drive to 2 and 3 hours away, all the fishing tackle, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, right? If I had to estimate it, I would say probably over the course of the last 20 years of my life, probably like $5,000, $10,000 that I spent on fishing. And how much fish have I actually caught to eat? Probably about maybe $2,000 worth of fish. No, not 2,000. Let's say $1,000 worth of fish. Of all the fish that I've caught, it was probably worth $1,000 out of the $10,000. So I'm at 10% of making my money back. Okay. Now, when I do start catching fish, it's time to keep those fish and not feel guilty about it. And so that's what I did today. I kept another striper. Now, this striper was bigger than the one I caught yesterday morning. And once again, I almost got caught slipping because I went out at 6:30 and I hooked into this fish at like 7:30. And I'm like, I got to get back because I got a show to do. So the fish is on ice in the sink. And so I've got to fillet this fish. Now, my friend Brad, who lives up in New Hampshire, gave me some tips on making full use of this fish. So he's like, keep the collarbone. You can bake that in olive oil. It's very good. He said you can even keep the rib cage after you fillet it. You just bake it in the oven and the fish falls right off of the bones. And of course you fillet it. So the whole fish gets used. And when the fish is gone, it goes into a landfill and actually provides fertilizer. So, really? Sorry, guys. Now, I know this isn't most of you, but I had to say something about this. I had like 5 people in the comments mad at me. I can't believe you let to dust. It's all about intent. Bible says thou shalt not murder. Obviously, you're not supposed to... Uh-oh. Did I lose you guys? Oh, no. Okay, we're going to end the show, I suppose. What is going on with this? It says we got sound here. All right. Have a good day, you guys. Much love.